I would demand they resign because you didn't get the choice as a parent to decide if your child was going to be in a safe environment because they decided for you and then they hid this from you.
Wake up and win. Wake up and win.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Wake Up and Win podcast. I'm your host, Blaise with my beautiful wife, who is actually the number one host. I'm the co-host, Christina Ferre.
Hello.
And we're back with another episode today for you guys. And today, what are we talking about today?
We're going to talk about the Grace Report.
Okay, the Grace Report on Brad Tebbit, right? And then let's explain what grace is for those who, not theological grace, but let's explain who grace is.
We'll go for it.
No, you.
Yeah, you've got this one.
I don't even remember what it stands for now. But Blaise Zacharias, who is the grandson of Billy Graham, right? So he's an attorney, and he started a group that basically takes care of, works within the church to basically over the years, while he was a lawyer, attorney, as he would get cases, the ones that impacted him the most as a Christian were those that were sexual abuse cases, sexual assault, sexual abuse cases. And then taking it further, he found that they were happening in communities of faith a lot. So that really impacted him. So he started an organization called Grace, and
godly response.
Yes, to bad things.
Abuse in the church, maybe.
There you go. Yeah, godly response.
Google it really quick.
Yeah. So anyway, so he started this group, and they took care of the situation with Ravi Zacharias back in the day, and which initially, by the way, Ravi Zacharias, that ministry, it's a very sad situation. For years, the man had impacted Christianity as a, not a theologian necessarily, but a, what do you call those? Apologist. Yeah. I'm very, yeah, there you go. That's my girl. Apologist. So Christian apologist. And I mean, great content, but apparently he had been sexually abusing women over the years. And, they did an internal investigation. They found him innocent in the internal investigation. So again, what's an internal investigation? In my mind, it's, hey, we think that you're, minimize it here or micro picture. Hey, something's bad is happening in that house. You go to that house, authorities go to that house. Hey, something's bad is happening here. We're hearing reports. Yeah. We'll take care of it. My wife and I will figure out what's going on wrong here. We'll write up a report and then we'll let you know. Shut the door. Holy crap, let's clean up everything. Let's take care of everything. And then we write our report and we give these initial statements. And as we're looking, we're finding this. As we're looking, we're finding this. The child in our house says that we feed them very well. You know, that's literally what these internal investigations are. Well, as we've looked, we found this, we found this, we found this. It's like, how do we know what you have found? Oh, we know it because of what you said you found. Oh, but you're the one being investigated. Well, anyway, the noise arose, which is what happens nowadays. It's not 1999, okay? It doesn't take a long time for information to get out. This is 2023, okay? So the noise arose. They wanted more focus on the investigation from an independent party. That's what's important. It's not just about a third-party investigation. What's important is an independent third party that has no skin in the game either way to the results of the investigation.
Somebody who is not a member of the current church or BFF with, David Slyker or anything like that. That would be an independent party. Yeah,
that as well, right? And or somebody that's not friends with somebody that's a victim or a survivor, right? So independent, right? So that's what they did at Ravi Zacharias Ministries. Grace came in, and then they found that he was guilty. They uncovered all this information. Well, why did they? Because as an independent third-party group that specializes in this, they have understanding. They also have no skin in the game. They're going to go find out. They're not there to advocate for this person or this person. They just want the truth. And the problem in charismatic Christianity, which FYI, I'm a charismatic. I'm a charismatic. We have dreams and visions over here. We're charismatic, okay? But I'll say this, The problem in charismatic Christianity is we believe that sincerity equals truth. Well, they're sincere. All it takes is for Stewart and Sliker to get on stage and cry or show some like sadness over the situation. And everybody's like, oh, yeah, we're sad too. Mike Bickle's our hero. Yeah, we're sad too. Is he being accused falsely? Oh, is this just a hit job? Almost like a left-wing hit job, It's like when President Trump was, all these women came up saying that he had done this. It's like, that's what's his name? Steve Strang kind of compared it to. So is this just like a hit job? And it's like, so you show sincerity and sadness over it. So then we just go, oh yeah. And then we go, but we trust in Jesus. We trust in Jesus, and Jesus is important to us. So these statements, okay, you're saying Jesus is important to us. We trust in Jesus. You're sitting in the crowd and you're going, yeah, these are my leaders. I trust in Jesus too. Jesus is important to me. What about truth and transparency? What's important to Jesus? If a woman was sexually abused, is that important to Jesus? Is it? If she was, and if she's afraid to come out, so she's coming out as a Jane Doe. FYI, that's if a Jane Doe comes out, that in the court of law, that's to be recognized as evidence. Okay, it's not just like, well, it's a Jane Doe, so we're not going to recognize this. And if they come out, I mean, that's one of the statements they said. If firsthand evidence comes out, I'm like, what are you guys trying to say? You want a video? Like, you want an RAPE kit from 25 years ago? Like, what do you want? What is evidence to all of you out there? So anyway, long story short, Grace came in and
yes, I found the name of it.
Yeah, go for it.
Godly response to abuse in the Christian environment. So that's what Grace stands for. And that is who everyone was calling for IHOP to use initially a few weeks ago. And kind of interesting that this came out and kind of shows why they did not go that route.
Yes. Explain that.
So IHOP KC has reached out to Grace before, and it looks like in 2018, they used Grace for a case for a man named Brad Tebbit.
Brad Tebbit. Now, they also said that the big thing too with the way that they're doing these statements is so interesting. One of the statements that they said initially was, we tried to reach out to Grace. Remember this? Like in early November, we tried to reach out to Grace, but we didn't get a response.
Right. And now Boss is working with the victims, so it's a conflict of interest. But Grace has responded that they never got a reach out from IHOP.
They literally looked through and like, we haven't had any reach outs from IHOP KC. There's no record of reach outs from IHOP KC.
And it makes sense why they wouldn't reach out to them whenever you hear this Grace report from.
When you hear this report, you'll realize that by the way, this Grace report, okay, number one, it could not be released to anyone unless they were involved in the case with Grace. Okay, so at the time, Jane Doe that was abused by Brad Tebbit, she was involved in a civil case against Brad Tebbit during this investigation. So during an investigation of a civil case or a criminal case, they couldn't talk to Grace. So she couldn't talk to Grace, not because she didn't have anything to say. You'll find that out soon.
But she was in the middle.
But she was in the middle of a case. So Grace's contract says anybody that speaks to us or is involved, anybody that's involved in the case with Grace, will have access to the report at the end. So Jane Doe never got access to the report. She actually wanted the report. She asked for it many, many times and raised heck to get it, but she couldn't get it because contractually, the only people that could get it were IHOP KC. So IHOP KC has had this 15-page Grace report since 2019, January of 2019. And it's very clear to me after reading it why they don't want this out there. Well, it was leaked last week. Mm-hmm. Shout out to Heaven Bent Podcast for leaking it. And I want to say something real quick. Every outlet that you're going to hear things from, I don't care if they're like, let's just say you have a charismatic Christian that's talking about this, and they're pure-hearted, not bitter, not angry, and you're like, wow, I love this outlet to get this information from. Great. What if it's heaven bent and she literally says that she is a former Christian? Okay, so, well, I'm not going to listen to her because she's a former Christian. What if what she's giving is more truthful than what you're getting from the stage at IHOP KC? Who would you listen to then? Because I'll say this, I'd rather have the spirit of truth with the wrong label, not theologically, FYI, not for my theology, but I'd rather have someone that's giving me true information with the wrong label on them than somebody that's covering for possible mishandling of sexual abuse. Wouldn't you? I think you would, right? That, in my mind, is the Good Samaritan story in a nutshell. So here we are, the Grace Report. We can't read this whole thing to you, but we will link to, in the beginning of the description. You can link and read the whole thing yourself. But we're going to just brush over and kind of cover the important things that we saw. I'm going to let you start.
Okay. All right. So important things that we underlined was, first of all, he was the director. This is Brad Tebbit. Was IHOP's director of the, you said this was like
Simeon
senior
Company.
citizens,
Yeah, Simeon
right?
Company.
Okay.
Simeon Company, which is 55 and older.
Okay. And so IHOP hired Grace to conduct an independent investigation. And because what happened was Jane Doe, who we now know, she came out and said that in 1987, her father died. And she had a fractured relationship with her mother. She was just coming out of a hurtful dating relationship. This is all like word for word from the Grace Report, just FYI too. And Brad Tebbit took her in almost as a parenting role. And she would stay the night over there. Yeah, this is hard to read.
It is hard to read.
This is hard to read.
You mean because of the content?
Well, both, and it's also very blurry. But here's the meat of it.
Yeah, give the meat of it.
Brad Tebbit admitted to kissing and inappropriately touching he says 16-year-old. So that's molesting somebody. He admitted to that.
As a 28-year-old married man, youth pastor.
He was her youth pastor,
Her dad died. Her mother was not in the picture very well. And they took her in, and he admits to kissing her and rubbing her private parts. That's what he says. He
says above the belt. That's what he admitted to. Now, she said that he actually raped her since she was 14.
So she goes on and says, this stands in stark contrast with Jane Doe's account that Mr. Tebbit reportedly engaged in repeated acts of fondling and sexual intercourse beginning when she was 14, during a time when she was still coping with the death of her father. So she is saying, no, this didn't start when I was 16. It started when I was 14. And no, it wasn't just he kissed me and fondled me. It was he had sex with me over a long period of time.
So we're saying, like, best case scenario,
he's a child molester.
This guy molested a 16-year-old. Worst case scenario, he continually raped a 14-year-old.
Let's keep it going. So after this, it says, in the fall of 88, Jane Doe reported what had taken place. So we're talking 86 to 88. Now she's 16. So she reports, which takes massive courage. I just think about, like, number one, the woman doesn't have a father.
Right.
Like, her father has died. And that is just so devastating to me in my mind, thinking of a 16-year-old girl, 14-year-old girl, father's just died, mother's disconnected from her life for some reason.
No, her mother is suffering from the loss of her spouse.
Correct. Yeah, correct. Sorry. So the mother's suffering, the daughter's suffering, the father's not in play at all. And she's going 2 years later going, I think I'm going to come out with this. Number one, more power to you. That is such bravery for you to do that at 16 years old or 17 years old without a supportive father figure in your life. I am just blown away that she did that. So she goes to the Modesto leaders and says, this happened. So it's still within the statute of limitations, FYI. And I just want to put this out there for those that say, why isn't there a criminal case? Why isn't there this? Well, there was a civil case, just FYI, which she did win that civil case, by the way. So why wasn't there a criminal case? Well, because the statute of limitations. It's just like, it's very sad the way that works. Even in Missouri, the statute of limitations is 3 years. So let's just think about it. Let's just say a minor gets raped or gets abused by somebody that's twice their age or something. And then you go, well, I should report this, but did it really happen? Or maybe I was involved. Maybe I liked it. Maybe I was the reason. Maybe I was dressed this way. Maybe I caused this.
Or you have the people you go to slow roll it, which is what happened with her. She brought it to the pastors
2 years later. So, and I'm just,
they could have done something about it at this time, because this was only 1990. Right?
No, this is 1988, 2 years later.
Oh,
two years later. They go to the Modesto leaders, and here's what they did. They confronted Mr. Tebbit, who had him return to Modesto to repent to Jane Doe of the abuse. Now, think about this, okay? And I just want to we're drawing a picture here. This is not IHOP KC that did this. We're talking about a picture of what happens in the church world when abuse is brought to light. These leaders go to her and say, okay, proud of you for bringing this forward, little 16-year-old or 17-year-old Jane Doe. You know what we're going to do? We want you to go to the one that was raping you, and we're going to confront him. We're going to have him repent to you. And she's like, okay, I guess this is what should happen. So he's, what does it say he did? He says, Mr. Tebbit eventually, let's see, they confronted Mr. Tebbit and had him return to Modesto to repent to Jane Doe. So he did. He repented to Jane Doe of the abuse. In 1988, 2 years later, Mr. Tebbit eventually in 2005, while working with a psychologist, made the observation that, quote, it seems that we dealt with this situation more as a marital affair. We did not focus on the offense to a minor. Concern was expressed about our marriage. No concerns were raised about the future ministry or me working with students in the future. So that was how it was handled. It was go repent to this girl for having an affair with her while you're a married minister.
Right.
And the girl gets I mean, what do you do if you are a pastor and someone comes to you? You don't say, go call the police, or you know what, we'll get this man to repent to you. No, you pick up the phone and call the police. If someone in your care is coming to you about a rape allegation, you don't try to figure out if they got raped. You don't try to question them through 5 to 10 to 20 meetings if they got raped or if it really was rape or if they, like questioning in depth and so on and so forth. You pick up the dang phone and you call the police with them right there. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry this happened. I don't care who it is that's getting accused of it and is it the best worship leader there? Is it a really awesome guy? It doesn't matter. You, given charge over this person, should say, you know what? I'm so sorry this happened. Thank you for your bravery in coming to me. I'm going to call the police right now. Are you comfortable with that? End of story.
Right.
End of story, which leads into later what we'll talk about. All right, let's move on. Now we see in this situation, he goes from, in 1990, he transitions to Alliance Church in Canada, in Hillsboro, Oregon. In 1995, he was hired by another church in Puyallup. I don't know what that is. 1998, Tebbit got employment at Pacific Northwest Christian and Missionary Alliance, where he served as the youth and children's director.
Why does this guy keep
literally
with children?
Then he's employed. While employed at the Christian and Missionary Alliance, Jane Doe reportedly reached out to Mr. Tebbit, indicating a desire to connect. Mr. Tebbit indicated he hesitated to respond, but he finally chose to dialogue with Jane Doe, and they began some correspondence. At the end of 2004, Jane Doe's pastor from the church confronted me with the reality of the nature of what had happened and asked me to take responsibility and action. I agreed to do this with a desire to encourage healing for myself and the young lady. Tebbit had not informed Christian Missionary Alliance of his abuse. So he's working in 2004 with students, and it's been almost 20 years since he had sexual relations with a 14, which he would say was 16. 14, 16, you're a pedophile in that situation, okay? Mr. Tebbit did not inform the current ministry he was under that he had this situation. Goes on, the director of another ministry where he was going. So they asked Mr. Tebbit to resign when they found out about this.
Just the right thing to do when you find out that there have been, somebody doing this, like ask them to resign.
It seems
makes
pretty
perfect
simple.
Sense.
Not take a leave of absence. Resign. So, okay. So then when the only reason it came to light was because Jane Doe tried to contact him because she still had problems with this. And I don't see where it says what she was contacting him about, but she's contacting him. He brought it to them because it was coming to a head. They said, yeah, you should meet with her or you should correspond with her, but you need to resign. We had no idea that you did this to somebody. So he now resigns, but get this. He was also onboarding with another ministry at the time called Infusion Ministries. He was asked by the director of that ministry to undergo a psychological evaluation to whether or not he's a danger to youth. Apparently they said he's not. So guess what? He was a Bible teacher and campus pastor for 3 years then. And then in 2012, he applied at the International House of Prayer in Kansas City, and he's been in some form. So he has been in some form of youth ministry for 30 years since this happened. There's a lot of things. He said no to his application on does he have sexual, emotional, or relational problems, or has he ever received help for psychological, sexual, emotional, or relational problems? He said no. That was on his application in 2012. So he lied on his application to come into IHOP. And then he was also asked about any accusations of sexual or physical abuse. He said that he had engaged in inappropriate touch with a 16-year-old in his youth ministry years later. So apparently they didn't do anything about that or ask anything further, and they just moved him forward into the internship. Then he applied to be on staff. The application didn't ask any questions about that. He didn't voluntarily provide any info. He was accepted on the staff in 2013. And then in 2015, he became the director of the 55 and older Simeon Company, which is an internship for folks that want to go through theological training at IHOP over age 55. Then when everything came out in the news, because Jane Doe finally put pressure, and then they said, where is this guy? Oh, he's on staff at IHOP as a director of something. So when the news came out in 2018, the chief operating officer at IHOP asked Mr. Tebbutt to come to his office and explain. So the chief operating officer recalls that Tebbutt was somewhat vague, which he found to be concerning. Tebbutt told the chief operating officer that Jane Doe was 16 or 17. So you see that the age guessing is getting older and older over time. He explained that what occurred was inappropriate, but was more of an emotional connection. Mr. Tebbutt also indicated that the relationship was only, quote, sexual insofar as he was, quote, married, kissing, and engaged in appropriate touching. That's only why it was sexual with Jane Doe. The chief operating officer's memory was to these events was above is that Tebbutt said it was above the clothes and was nothing below the belt. He also recalled that Tebbutt confessed he wanted to have sex with the person, but it didn't go anywhere. Mr. Tebbutt also described, so goes on and on and on. Hey guys, this episode is brought to you by Wake Up and Win Insurance. We help clients all over the nation with their term life, whole life, or universal life insurance, and we're definitely happy to help you with a consultation.
And we're hiring all over the nation, full-time and part-time positions, work from home. Check the description below for more info. Okay, so let's go to the analysis of part one. It says, but at a minimum, what is known is that Mr. Tebbutt's actions demonstrate that he utilized his position of power and authority as a youth intern minister to gain access to a minor in his care, to exploit her trust following the death of her father, and that he sexually violated the physical and emotional boundaries of a youth under his authority and care. So intense. Let's see. This is big. Though Mr. Tebbutt characterized these events as isolated and as moving outside of his marriage to find emotional fulfillment, Mr. Tebbutt's admissions indicate that his behavior was potentially criminal.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So his behavior was criminal. And this is where people they go, how can you comment on this? You don't know him. Literally we have people commenting that kind of thing. How can you comment on this? You don't know him. How are you going to act like you know what happened?
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, bro, there's a Grace report. It's a third-party independent investigation.
He literally admitted to molesting a 16-year-old. It is not.
My God.
I definitely believe her when she says that he
went further than that.
Yeah.
Because he obviously clearly indicates over and over, I think she was 16 or 17. So he starts at 16, then he goes, well, maybe she was 16 or 17. And as the years go by, he clearly has less and less remorse about the situation. I'm sure he's remorseful now in the sense that it's really messing with his life.
Of course.
But the dude bounced from youth ministry to youth ministry to youth ministry to youth ministry. And I'm literally thinking, you guys have kids out there? You want somebody that's done this to a 14-year-old to be taking care of your kiddo right now?
Exactly. And the point of this all isn't even actually right now about him. It's about IHOP KC and how they handled it.
How they handle these things.
We will get to.
Keep going. Go to the deception thing. I think that was that statement was really
I did also want to say clergy sexual abuse is an abuse of power and a desecration of the name of Christ. It is not an affair, nor is the victim equally culpable. The safety of God's sheep results from his character, not theirs. That's just important to remember about clergy sexual abuse. Like, this is not an affair.
Yeah.
It's not an affair. Okay, let's see.
And it's not always even an age difference thing that dictates whether or not it's like how intense it is. Because you can be 40 and the person that gets sexually abused or manipulated into a relationship can also be 40, but you're in the position of power. People go, oh yeah, don't like overdo that position of power thing. I'm like, dude, do you know what a position of spiritual authority does? Just authority in and of itself. If you have a boss that's hitting on you, that alone is like odd pressure, right? You go, well, I just quit. Yeah, maybe you would. Good on you, and you should. Now you add to it the position of a spiritual authority. It's somebody you're listening to, looking to for your soul's comfort. And all of a sudden, boom, something happens. That is sexual abuse as well. Yeah, there's an affair there, in a sense, if there's married parties, but there's also sexual and spiritual manipulation that's taking place because of the position.
Right. Okay. So in addition, Mr. Tebbutt's description of these events as an emotional connection or as moving outside of his marriage to find emotional fulfillment is a significant deception about his own responsibility and does not demonstrate any appreciation for the depravity and the devastating impact that occurs when a person with spiritual authority sexually abuses a minor.
So something else here I want to say, because people will continually say, like, well, why are we talking about this? Why we're talking about this, not to put Brad Tebbit on blast. However, he's kind of put himself on blast with this. Why we're talking about this is because IHOP has had this document since January of 2019. The IHOP leadership that's telling you what to do with the current allegation it's against Mike Bickle has had this document in their hands since 2019. Now, the question is, where is Brad Tebbit as of 5 days ago prior to the release of this? Where is he? Where is he? We'll find that out pretty soon. But yeah.
I mean, gosh, I feel like we could just go there. Let's roll. I feel like we just go there.
Well, let's go. Yeah, let's go there then. So there's a lot in this. You guys read it. Go look at it. What you'll find is like, here's some questions that Grace asked that I did like these, because they said, Mr. Tebbutt's acts and admissions after abuse and since the time raise a number of important questions about his stated repentance from sexual abuse. And they say, let's see, why did Mr. Tebbutt wait for Jane Doe to be the one to report this matter to FBC Modesto? That's a good question. And these questions are also for IHOP KC to ask themselves about why they kept him on staff, which they did, and put him in position to work with 14 to 17-year-olds, recruiting them into IHOP-U, FYI. Why did he permit FBC Modesto leadership to frame this matter as an affair rather than a crime? Why did he not turn himself into the police? Why did he not inform his subsequent employers? Why did he wait until after being confronted by Jane Doe's pastor to report this abuse to his employer? Why did he not proactively pursue help for his distorted patterns of thinking rather than wait to be drawn into the process in 2004 and 2005? Why did he continue to pursue employment in churches, ministries, and a school where he could get granted access to places and positions of leadership and authority over children and youth? Why on the 2012 IHOP internship application did he deny receiving help for psychological, sexual, and emotional relational problems? Why did Tebbit stay silent when he applied for IHOP staff position? So we're going to fast forward to the very end of this report. It's so detailed and it's very long. One of the analyses is from Grace after looking at IHOP as a whole. They say the wounded are not prioritized. You go, why would a place prioritize the wounded? Well, let me just give you an example, okay? IHOP KC, I was there for 4 years. The type of people that go there, okay? It's a very wide dynamic of people. You have really intense, spiritually healthy people that are just really on fire for God, okay? That's one type of person, all right? And everybody, I say healthy, everybody's got their woundedness. Everybody's got their issues. But like, I went there from being a full-time staff member at a Christian ministry. I left my salary because I wanted to go be an intercessor and pray. All right. Like, I had my own issues, but I went there not like all broken and battered. I went there excited to go hopefully get launched out into the mission field after I'm done. That's literally why I went. You have a lot of other kids that go at age 18, hadn't even gone to school yet. They've gone through all kinds of stuff. You got people, like literally you got people in housing situations there, babe. I'm telling you, there'd be like 12 guys living in a house in Grandview. Like everybody's paying $25 a month to split 17 people in one room. Like I am exaggerating on that, but like just cut it by 50%. And that's probably what it was. Yeah. Like it was broke, battered, busted people because you're raising support to go be an intercessor. It's like, you got people with all kinds of like emotional baggage. And it actually, because most of what we do there was pray, sit in a room and pray. And you can sit on a laptop and read or browse the internet. Nobody's like controlling what you're doing, even as an intern or staff member. So like you're really just there to pray. So it actually garners lazy people. Like it attracts lazy people. There's a lot of lazy people that go there. I'm not saying everybody there's that lazy. Trust me, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying it attracts kids that don't want to do a lot, and they kind of like have issues. So there's a lot of people there that are young people that have issues that need a place that can actually like, they basically are saying in this report, IHOP KC does not prioritize those types of people. Mm-hmm. Let me just read this statement. Prioritizing the wounded means IHOP would not have permitted Mr. Tebbit to remain in a position of leadership for several weeks or even a few days after this came out, which they did. Allowing Mr. Tebbit to remain in a visible position of authority and responsibility at IHOP after these events became fully known by the leadership was not likely to encourage any potential victims from speaking out. This is a great example of how from the front, Stuart and Dave and Isaac said, if you've been sexually abused or this is triggering things, come tell a leader.
Right.
You're like, you guys don't prioritize this until something scandalous happens. Mm-hmm. So why would anybody feel comfortable when you have a man that was accused of this and through a civil case shown that he did it and by his own admission, and he's still in leadership? What does that say to... Read this one and we'll end it there.
Grace also noted that several different individuals brought concerning information to Grace relating to specific instances of alleged sexual misconduct reportedly committed by other individuals associated with IHOP. This information falls outside the scope of this investigation regarding Brad Tebbit and is therefore not included here, but will be addressed in a follow-up communication with IHOP in the coming weeks. These issues must be addressed, and Grace recommends that these matters be promptly investigated. A failure to investigate and implement recommended changes is likely to result in continued missteps when handling and responding to misconduct issues at IHOP, which is what we're seeing right now.
So think about it. January of 2019, Boz is saying, this must be addressed in the weeks to come. I'm talking to you guys in the weeks to come. I want to read what they also recommended that IHOP does with Brad Tebbit. So they said, decide whether Brad Tebbit will be permitted to return to IHOP. Without a proven demonstration of authentic repentance, Brad Tebbit's employment and association with IHOP should be terminated. Should he be permitted to return to IHOP, he must never be allowed on the property when minors are present. Let's see. In addition, he must never be allowed at or granted participation in any off-campus IHOP activities in which minors are present. So this is Grace telling IHOP he probably shouldn't be on staff, but if he is, don't ever let him around minors. And so what do? They put him in charge of recruiting for IHOP U. Who does, though? Who would approve that?
Probably the president of IHOP
Who's
U,
that?
Which is David Sliker. So instead of like taking this seriously, and it's so sickening. It's so sickening. It's so unfair to every parent out there who has trusted IHOP KC. It's so unfair to every child out there, to everyone who has been a part. Imagine trusting your child in the care of a ministry, and they have somebody recruiting to this university who molested somebody the same age as your child, and that is who is recruiting for the university. Like, it's sick.
Good move.
It's sick. It's not just like, I get it, like, forgiveness, restoration. People can say that all they want, But like, what does that look like and what does that mean? It does not mean allowing him around minors.
It is so mind-blowing.
It's like they did the exact opposite. They did the exact opposite.
Like
the ELT leaders in charge did the exact opposite. And you know what I think?
Is this like, yeah, I could say so many very extreme statements, right? I'm just not going to.
Well, it seems like almost like intentional.
Like, is this the freaking mafia? Like, what the heck is going on? Are you guys, so there's multiple things at play here. Either in this whole scenario here, plus what's happening right now. Are you guys very caught off guard by all this and just surprised and just disheveled and just don't know what to do and just, man, I guess we should have gotten an independent third party. Oh, but we did. It's too late. Oh, we'll just do an internal investigation. So massive lack of wisdom. That's all I'm wondering. Is this just massive lack of wisdom, massive lack of like counsel? I have a hard time believing that because you've got supporters at IHOP that are multimillionaires, like people that support IHOP KC, multimillionaires. That are funneling money to IHOP KC, multimillionaires, like lots of cash flow, lots of successful people that Mike Bickle has access to, that you guys have access to as the ELT. Like, you're not unwise. I have a hard time believing that, although everything you're doing seems very unwise. So that's number one. Number two, you're intentionally doing something that is very sinister. Like one of the two, it seems very, very sinister what's happening, or somewhere in the middle. You're a little bit unwise on it, which we're all unwise at times, but this seems just like so foolish. And I know where the foolishness comes from. It comes from this idea that everybody that falls into a sexual sin, be it let's just say with the situation with Tebbutt. 14-year-old, he's 28, he's a youth pastor, brings her in, and he sexually molests her or rapes her, one of the two. Which one's worse? How about they're both bad? How about, like, the Grace Report actually says it's a red herring argument. Not both of them are criminal. And you're allowing this man, well, it's been many years and he's very repentant. Really? So that's how we're going to do things. How about the man stop jumping from ministry to ministry to ministry with his ministry addiction and just go get a job? Go get a job. What's so wrong with that? If he's really loves Jesus so much, which I don't know anything about Brad as a person. I just know what he's done. If he loves Jesus, guess what? He can literally preach the gospel on the streets if he wants to. He can pray for a sick person when he sees them. He can get a job and bring an impact in culture. And hopefully he really has restored, but he should not be working around children.
Right. And so let's talk about the leadership real quick, because yes, all of that is true and terrible. And this specific instance, of course, Brad Tebbit, like, this is terrible, but we're talking to the IHOP KC ELT leadership right now. And what comes to mind for me is like, be faithful. If you're faithful in the little, you'll be faithful in the, you know what I'm saying? With more. If you're dishonest with little, then you'll be dishonest with much. So follow me here. This is not little. So don't hear what I'm not saying. Everything that happened to Jennifer Roach is terrible. This is not little, but it's an easy answer to handle it. You were handed a recommendation. You were given exact step-by-step blueprint of how to handle this. It was easy. You were given something easy and you didn't do it. So how in the world could we trust you with something so massive that's going on right now? We don't trust you. You couldn't handle the little. You were not honest in the little. You were not faithful with the little. You will not be faithful right now. Like, what's happening right now with the LT is like insane.
Yeah. So for those of you, like everybody across the board, we all have our biases, right? We all have our biases. I've had people say on our comments like, oh my gosh, you got it's clear that you're coming from a good place. I've had other people be like, oh my gosh, you're the most bitter person I've ever seen in my life. You're the biggest narcissist. I don't care what anybody thinks at the end of the day. That it doesn't actually matter. My opinion of you, your opinion of us. But you've never been connected to this ministry ever, except for by being married to me after the fact. Yeah. And you're just watching from an outsider perspective going, this is the playbook they were handed. They let the guy who slept with a 14-year-old or molested the 14-year-old
in charge of recruiting. They put him in charge of recruiting other 14-year-olds.
Is that a good idea, everybody? Is that a good idea?
That's the thing. I want to take a step back.
Well, David fell to Bathsheba. Isn't there mercy? Isn't there grace? That's literally what charismatics will say in these comments. They'll think that, and they'll say it. You just got to hear what you're saying, folks. Let me ask you a question. Is that true? Is there an opportunity to grow and be restored? And all? Of course, but you do not put an addict back next. You don't literally put him to store the communion wine for his job. Like, that would be stupid. You don't take the guy that's like, I used to be an addict. I used to be an Alcoholics Anonymous. Well, that's awesome. Well, we're going to put you in charge of just putting the communion wine away, and we just know that God's restored you. Like, that's how foolish it sounds, folks. But this is way more important than a job like that. This is our children. This is our children. Well, there's no evidence that he's done anything since. Is there not? Is there not? Like, how would we even know at this point? Because it takes people many years to come out about these things, which is why these statute of limitation laws are very, very sad in a lot of ways. Even what we're looking at in Missouri, with probably what's going to come to the forefront over time in the Mike Bickle case, is statute of limitations, sadly. So we'll probably see some civil suits come for things that are in the first report. And we know this from other conversations, but we also know it from public in their first report, that one of the allegations is criminal. So that's why, that was in IHOP's first statement. So one of Mike Bickle's allegations is a criminal allegation. You still want to sit around and say everybody's not a victim, folks? You still want to sit around and say this is all just a setup? What does anybody have to gain with this?
Well, here's the thing too. Let me just say one thing for people who aren't there yet. Like, if you cannot even fathom that Mike Bickle could do that, okay, fine. If you think all of these allegations are just insane, fine. But can you admit that they were handed this grace report and they let a man who molested a child, put him in charge of recruiting for IHOP? Can you admit that they're not qualified? They're not qualified to handle this at all. That's all I'm asking. Because I know it's a big step to get all the way up to Mike Bickle, but can you admit that Dave Sliker and that Stuart Greaves, they are not capable of handling sexual abuse allegations? Can you get to that point? Because
let's just say it's it's not about IHOP. Let's just call it First Baptist Church down the street, Catholic Church down the street, Methodist Church down the street, whatever. Let's just call it a regular school. What about a school? What if it was your child's charter school that they went to, and you found out that somebody was working there, the teacher that was working there was somebody that 30 years ago had slept with somebody the same age as your child? Would you be good with that? Would you be okay with that and be like, well, we told them to go repent to the child that they molested when they were 28 and the child was 15? It's like, are you kidding me? Sometimes the church does the silliest things. We do the silliest things. For instance, whenever problems are happening internally, we think we can handle it with an internal investigation. What does that mean? How is that wise in any way, shape, or form, unless we're literally trying to hide something? And if you're not trying to hide something, you sure as heck are making everybody on the outside thinking you are. I actually deeply want to trust Stuart Greaves. I actually do. You've heard my private conversations with you about that, and you're like, how can you still think? And I'm our private conversations, I deeply want to. I actually want to trust Dave Sliker. I do. I would like to. I don't at all. Not because of them as people. Current ELT, I don't trust them at all. You know who I trust is people that after this report came out and they saw the way it was handled, guess what they did?
Let's talk about that, actually. I forgot. Let's pull up Alan Hood's tweet the other day. Hang on, let me find it. This is what Alan Hood tweeted. He said, I led the internal investigation with John O'Hall and called in Grace. So he's actually the one that called in Grace.
Alan.
Yeah.
Surprise, surprise.
Mm-hmm. I voted for the removal of Brad from staff. And though I moved away from Kansas City, I protested their keeping of him on staff at every turn, verbally and in writing to the executive leadership team and board. So if he hadn't been leading the internal investigation, who knows if Grace ever would have even shown up? Nobody ever would have called Grace, probably.
So is that because, again, back to earlier, it's either these guys are very unwise about the way they're doing things, or they're purposefully not wanting people to come in? This is a different topic, and we'll probably do a quick follow-up episode afterward, but Gracia had an allegation. She went to Stuart Greaves of the Night Watch and said, I was raped. And you have literally people, when there's a rape allegation, you'll have all kinds of people pop up, men, women, let's say, yeah, it did happen. You'll have women say, I don't believe her at all. I don't believe her. There's no way. Like, you'll have all those opinions. Those opinions, they don't matter. At the end of the day, if somebody says they were raped, then you bring it to leadership. So she brought it to Stuart. The next thing that happened was multiple meetings with her. Multiple, like the first meeting was, are you sure you were raped? Okay, tell us about this. Another meeting. Okay, tell us about this. Another meeting. Tell us about this. Then they even bring in the man that was a staff member at the time and brought him into the room with her, surprise meeting. Hey, I want you to hear out his side of the story. Can you imagine, like I don't care what you are as the leader. You think, well, I'm the leader. I can parcel this out. I can judge that she hasn't been. I don't believe her. And I know this guy. He's a good guy. I need her to hear his side of the story. That is so, like, in what world are you living in? I know what world you're living in. You're living in a 20 to 30 year world of an enclosed community where y'all do things a certain way that are totally absurd according to what the outside world would say. And not even just the outside the outside secular, but even Christendom as a whole. It's like, you don't handle those things internally. You're not qualified to handle them internally. And if you put yourself there, now you're in the target. If you wonder why these leaders are currently in the target, it is a path that not just us, but it is all over. This is not going to go away. This will not go away until the current ELT that's mishandling things and has been mishandling for a very long time makes some immediate adjustments, not just reforms. I think these guys need to resign.
I would say if I was at IHOP KC right now, if you're at IHOP KC right now, think about what they just did, putting your children in an unsafe environment. And I would go up to them right now and I would demand they resign, because you didn't get the choice as a parent to decide if your child was going to be in a safe environment, because they decided for you and then they hid this from you. I would demand they resign.
That's actually a great point. Like, if you are there right now listening to this and you're seeking Jesus, praying, and you love the Lord and you want to trust your leaders and all these things, this is not about honoring leaders. This is not that conversation, just FYI. Actually, the best way to honor these leaders, if I was doing what they were doing, I would hope somebody would come to me and say, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? Like, why did you allow for this? Mm-hmm. Like, this is... It's crazy. It's crazy. So I think that would be a great thing to do, actually, is go to these guys and ask them, like, did you know about this? How come Alan Hood...
and John O'Hall, let me read his. He said, the way that... this is a tweet also. The way that this was handled in the early days of finding out was a matter of conscience for me, that I had to resign. And for the record, I never received the report when it came out and do not know who leaked it, because people were trying to figure out who leaked it. Like, Heaven Bent broke the story, but... nobody knows who leaked the actual Grace report.
So Jono,
but anyway, so he resigned because of this. Jono resigned.
Jono's the brother of Wes Hall, who led the IHOP Awakening in 2009, which was powerful. One of my best friends back at that time got his eyes healed at this thing. I mean, it was an incredible thing that went on. But Jono said, the way this was handled, when I realized it, I stepped down. I resigned as a matter of conscience. Alan Hood, it was very similar. He stepped away as a matter of conscience. It's understandable why they would. And it makes you wonder, of all these mega leaders that were there that left, you can actually look and see these guys went different places. Why? Well, maybe their story from stage was one thing, but they definitely weren't saying from stage, because we're mishandling a case of a rapist, of a known sexual abuser from 30 years ago. You know, I kind of feel for these guys that did leave, like, because they're going to get, those guys probably get flack too. Like, why didn't you say something more at the time? Why didn't you, like, they made a move to get out of there. And that's understandable. I wish some of this.
It sounds like Alan Hood did keep reaching out to them and saying they needed to remove Brad.
Actually,
what are you going to do if they're not going to remove him?
Yeah,
like,
it's
he
true.
kept messaging them,
and then here they are doing something now. Here they are doing something real, and they're putting their necks on the line for it, because I know even guys like Joel Richardson, right? Joel wasn't a guy that was in leadership there, although he was supposed to speak at their recent conference, and his name's still on stuff on their thing. Joel's literally coming out like flamethrower at these guys, and it's not helping his ministry, just FYI. This doesn't help anybody's ministry in the charismatic movement, especially an end times teacher, to come out guns blazing at this mega ministry. And literally the kingpin, Mike Bickle, the kingpin of the end times eschatology charismatic movement, the kingpin, the guy that you would say, this is the least expected guy to do anything like this. You think it makes any minister look good to come out like this? It's not a cancel. This is not a cancel culture movement. This is not. Nobody's trying to cancel IHOP KC. We're actually trying to cancel secrecy
and sexual abuse. We're trying to cancel a culture of secrecy and sexual abuse that is a principality of secrecy and abusive cover-ups. That is a problem, and it's coming for the head of IHOP KC right now, not because people are bitter at it, but because something's gone on behind the scenes that's not okay, and this report proves it. So real quick, guys, before we let you guys go, we have to say that Jennifer Roach actually, from the report, okay, she's the woman that was abused as a 14-year-old by Brad Tebbit. She spoke up in 2018. She went public with her statements. Now, she's now an advocate for abuse survivors, and she's like, I think a professional like therapist or something, advocate for abuse survivors. She's very sharp. And so she spoke up. We're going to just play this so that you guys hear what this person says about it.
Dad had just died, really unexpectedly. He died in a car accident. And so my mom was left with 3 teenagers to raise on her own. She'd been a stay-at-home mom. She hadn't previously been working. It was really hard for her to get over the death of her husband, and she had the 3 of us. And one of the staffers from the church, him and his wife, noticed me and noticed I was struggling. I was about 14 years old. And they invited me to start staying at their house, first on weekends, and then for longer periods of time. And eventually I just moved in indefinitely. And that was really the beginning of the grooming process. They were really kind to me at first. I thought I had died and gone to heaven. I was getting a lot of attention, and I was getting some of my needs met from them. So he started the whole grooming process with me, started with just kindness, moved into kissing, moved into fondling, moved into actual sex. It depended upon the week, upon what was happening. Sometimes that kind of contact with him was really frequent, and sometimes it wasn't happening at all, or depending upon what was going on. When I was living there with them, it was much more frequent. What had happened was in my high school English class, we were reading Macbeth, and Macbeth is all about secrets, and the way that secrets can kill you, can destroy you. And I felt so convicted from reading Macbeth that I wanted to tell by the time we got to that.
What was the church's response?
Their response was terrible. They completely and entirely mishandled the situation. At first, they didn't believe me, which I suppose is common. I would have liked to have had a different reaction. On subsequent meetings, they kept asking me if I wanted to take my story back, if I was just doing this for attention. At one point, they put me in a room with, I don't remember, 4 or 5 other adult men and asked me to describe with specific words about what had happened. As a 17-year-old girl in this room with these men I didn't really know by myself doing this. They failed to tell my mom. I was a minor. I was a high school girl, and they kept it from my family. They should have reported it to the police and didn't. They told me, never speak about this again. Thank you for telling us. Never speak about it again. Forgiveness is not something that can be forced. I was actually taught forgiveness is an act of your will, and it's something that you force yourself to do, and then you move on. And if you don't, you really have, you're showing your spiritual immaturity. And I don't think that's true at all. All right, I take it a day at a time. And some days I have really great days. And I feel like, yeah, I forgive Marvin. I forgive the church. I forgive Brad. I forgive all of the people who covered this up. And then there's other days where that is not where I am at all. And I actually I'm okay with that. Well, this is something I've been talking about for a really long time, right? This isn't like, oh, I just decided to talk about this. But there's such a cultural moment right now of people in politics and people in Hollywood and people in these positions of power having done these things, and people in sports. And it's the church too. This is a conversation that the church needs to be having that's long overdue.
Wow. We got to comment on this. We have to comment on this. So she says, this is how it was handled. They brought her into a room and asked among
with a bunch of grown men.
You imagine being 16 or 17?
Yeah.
And like 2 years later, and like tell us in detail what happened. So
Terrible.
I'm gonna say this because I want to lead up to our next episode of Gracious Story. She was brought into a room multiple times with a man twice her age, having her recall over and over to determine whether or not this was rape that she initially came and reported to him.
Yeah.
Like, what are the questions that are being asked to decide if it's rape or not? And why is that okay to do that as the spiritual leader? Imagine if somebody brings you a rape allegation. Let's say you work in a public school district. Somebody brings you a rape allegation. What should be your response? To bring them into that meeting multiple times to ask them details so that you can figure out and then convince them that it wasn't rape until they admit that it wasn't. And then finally, a year later, like, actually it was. Actually it was. I was just tired of getting met with about it and recalling it. What should be your response? How about you just call the police? Imagine that. But why wouldn't they want to call the police at IHOP KC? What would the police find? What would internal or what would third-party investigations find? Maybe they found things like this. You know what's interesting actually about this report is this report was being written at the time that Stuart Greaves was handling Gracia's rape allegation. Do you know that? At the same time that Gracia's rape allegation, because apparently it happened in 2014, and she stayed there and like it's going to him consistently, and they're handling this, and this is being done. This is being written while these allegations are coming forward. And that's why at the end it says, Grace has found that many people came to us concerned about all these crazy allegations, which we don't have the room to put it in this report, but we'll be talking to y'all soon and making some recommendations, which you're probably not going to listen to. So last thing I'll say too, and then any comments that you have about this stuff, but like, you know, she said at the end, it's a moment, and this was 2018. So you had all the Me Too and everything. So I'm just going to say this as a man that is actually, as a man, some people might say, oh, Blaise, you must just be like the wokest dude ever. Am I a woke dude?
That is hilarious. That does make me laugh whenever people say that. Now, this is the first time Blaise has ever been accused of being woke. He is the least woke person you will meet.
Who did I vote for in 2016? Actually, cancel culture. I got our business in 2016 canceled when we lived in Asheville, North Carolina, the Portland of the South. How did I get our business canceled?
Coming after Hillary Clinton.
I came after Hillary Clinton in 2016.
On Facebook. Just on Facebook, posting stuff about Hillary Clinton, and then we
just like, don't vote for this lady.
Our business.
Everybody was like, forget these guys. We lost all of our friends. We lost our whole business.
This was before we were doing life insurance, though. This was a completely different business that was based around artists and entrepreneurs in Asheville.
Yeah, completely different style of business for sure. But like, trust me, I'm like not woke like that at all. And nor am I about cancel culture. I do not like cancel culture style. It's not my style at all. But what I realize is that one thing that I am aware of is child sex trafficking. I'm very aware of the reality of that problem from Republican senators and politicians and Democratic senators and politicians. I realize that it's across the board on both sides, the religious right and the atheist left. It's on both sides. Child sex trafficking, like porn problems, all that stuff. It is bad out there. I realize that. And so I'm completely aware of that. So that's why when I hear of like, you hear of like Ted Haggard years ago, people would have thought, never Ted Haggard. Well, actually, yeah, he was sleeping with a lot of young boys or a lot of young men. He was grooming them. But he was like an awesome guy, No, he wasn't actually. So it's like every time there's like something that actually comes out about somebody, you're like, never could have been them. So like this situation, you got to be open to the fact that you could be wrong about Mike Bickle. not because his theology's so wacky or his visions were wacky or this, that, or the other. Like I still got to work through all that myself. I got to work through all that. Like, I don't know, but somebody can be right as heck in their theology and wrong in their secret life, completely wrong. And you can be anointed to preach and the power of God flow through you. Greatest teaching for you cessationists out there that listen to us, the greatest teaching spiritual gift on the planet could be flowing through somebody, and you can be doing something terrible behind the scenes. So I think the church is in for a reckoning right now, and that's what's happening. So what was the Harvey Weinstein thing, years ago? One person came out, she was totally discredited. Then another person came out and and then by the end of it, it was like 99 women or something. And then now the guy literally went to prison. So totally discredited at first. So that's what's happening when you see these statements that their initial response is internal investigation, discredit, discredit, discredit. You should have a red flag up. You should have a red flag. Okay. Not because sometimes people have false allegations, but because when you see an internal investigation without independent people coming in to look, and then discrediting victims left and right, you should have red flags, especially after reading a report like that. Any final statements before we wrap this one up?
Well, I just will say, just along the lines of being woke, something that I do think is very interesting and honestly very cool about all of this is there are very woke people and very unwoke people. There's Christians here, there's ex-Christians, there's people deconstructing their faith right now. There's all of these people coming together, like people still inside IHOP KC, people who are ex-IHOPers, people who have never been there, but all of these people are coming together and being like, this is wrong, and standing up for these women. And I think that's really beautiful. I love that there is this, common bond of for all different types of, politics, religion, whatever it is, we can all agree that something terrible is going on right now, and we will fight for it.
There's men, there's women, there's the 75 genders in between all come. All right. With that said, we love you guys, and we'll see you on the next one. Peace.